Good afternoon. Welcome back. We have a special introduction. We'd like Novi Craven to come to the podium and introduce our next speaker.
It's my pleasure to introduce you to Jerome Adams. Jerome M. Adams, MD, MPH, is the 20th Surgeon General of the United States. Dr. Adams, board certified anesthesiology.
Man, you did that better than most. Wow.
I've been practicing today. Served as Indiana State Commissioner for 2014 to 2017. As a Surgeon General, Dr. Adams oversees the operation of the U.S. Public Health Service Commissioned Corps, which has approximately 6,700 unified health officers who serve to promote, protect, and advance the health and safety of our nation. Dr. Adams' motto as Surgeon General is better health through better partnerships. As Surgeon General, he's committed to maintaining strong relationships with public health and communities, forging new partnerships with non-traditional partners. Most importantly, he's a father of 3 and spends his time coaching on his off days.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I know it's late. Good afternoon, everyone. You know, earlier today, they had me speak after Ivanka Trump, and today they're having me speak after Novi. I'm starting to feel set up here, you all. I'm starting to feel set up. But thank you, Novi, for your kind introduction. And in case you all didn't recognize, we have met before. We know each other, and there is not a more inspiring individual you will ever meet. She is really just truly amazing. So thank you. Please give another round of applause to Novi. And thank you to the council members for taking time out of your very busy schedules to meet here in Washington, D.C. Folks, I don't think many people appreciate that these are very busy people in their own rights. They have day jobs. Most of them around the table have 4 or 5 different other day jobs, and they're here because they are committed to this mission. They know how important it is that we lift up youth sports. So thank you, Sam. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Shauna. Thank you, Trevor. Thank you, Johnny. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Brenda. And thank you to Jennifer and to Christina, too. They've just done a fantastic job helping lead a tremendous meeting today. So thank you, everyone. And congratulations to all of you on the launch of the National Youth Sports Strategy. You know, it really wasn't planned in advance, but it couldn't have been more fitting that Novi introduced me, because earlier this year, fellow council member and co-chair Mariano Rivera and I had the honor of being part of the U.S. delegation to the Special Olympics in Abu Dhabi. And even as a dad, as a youth coach, and many people don't know this, but as a brother of someone with an intellectual difference, my time at the Special Olympics was transformative. I learned what real inclusivity looks like. And I've talked about the fact that my brother has an intellectual difference. One of the things that I lament is that he didn't experience inclusivity during his upbringing. he didn't have an opportunity to participate in youth sports or be a part of the Special Olympics. He often sat on the sidelines or at home while me and my other brothers were out playing sports. And that's something that we need to change. We need to change, and it's people like Novi who are going to help us change that. I got to see the power of sports at the Special Olympics to lift up communities, to bring nations together. We were in Abu Dhabi, and there were nations that were literally on TV talking about going to war with each other, and their Special Olympics athletes were standing right alongside each other, giving each other high fives and hugs. Sports and the Special Olympics have the ability to empower people who've been stigmatized and downtrodden. And again, I got to meet thousands of amazing people like Anovia, who aren't just great people, but I got to tell you all, they're great athletes who could beat the pants off of me on the field or in the arena. I got to see them up close, and I got to see the power lifters and the basketball players and the soccer athletes, and I'm a pretty good athlete myself, and I couldn't hang with them. They were quite frankly just mind-blowing. I've also seen how the youth sports strategy intersects with and lifts up my priorities as Surgeon General of the United States. We know that youth sports are an effective and fun way to achieve lifelong health benefits that will lower healthcare costs, the number 2 expense for most employers. But in addition to health benefits, we also know sports can teach teamwork and leadership skills that are important as the youth transition into the workforce, skills that the employers out there tell us far too many of our youth don't have today. And that's why part of the youth sports strategy is engaging an array of stakeholders like businesses and economic development policymakers. Studies have shown further that youth who participate in sports are more resilient and less likely to experiment with substances. I told you about one of my brothers. Another one of my brothers, Philip, is in jail right now due to crimes he committed to support his substance misuse. I often think if we'd been able to keep him more involved in youth sports, to have him around positive role models and positive teammates who directed him towards the good things in life instead of towards substance misuse, I often think if we'd been able to do that, perhaps he would have had a different outcome. Perhaps he wouldn't be sitting in a prison a little bit away from me right now while his brother is the Surgeon General of the United States speaking before you. So, as we address youth vaping, youth marijuana use, and the opioid epidemic, encouraging youth sports involvement and expansion has got to be part of that overall plan. And finally, we know youth sports ties directly into my priority of health and national security. This is a quote from one of the Surgeons General of the Armed Forces. Today's 8th grader is the soldier, seaman, or airman of 2025. Think about that for a second. Today's 8th grader, the people we're trying to lift up, is the soldier, seaman, or airman of 2025. Not that far away. But 7 out of 10, 70% of our country's 18 to 24-year-olds are ineligible for military service right now because they can't pass a physical, can't meet the educational requirements, or have a criminal background record. But we know youth sports involvement leads to healthier young adults, both mentally and physically. It also leads to increased military recruitment and retention and a safer nation. So if we want to be safe as a country, if we want to be safe as a planet, we have to continue to encourage and lift up youth sports. Now, you all have had a long day and you don't want to hear me go on, so I'll wrap it up here. But in closing, I'd like to reiterate my motto that Novi mentioned as Surgeon General, which is better health through better partnerships. The National Youth Sports Strategy is really, at its core, about forging new partnerships and strengthening those partnerships that already exist in communities. Partnerships with kids and parents, partnerships with teachers and soldiers, partnerships with policymakers and business makers. And I'm confident with the great team that we have assembled within HHS and the amazing folks that have stepped up to be a part of the council leading the charge in communities, along with all of you. This is key, all of you. This isn't about HHS, it isn't even about the council. It's about all of us and all of you. If we all come together, we will truly be able to achieve better health through better partnerships that lift up youth sports. Now, you've all got the game plan. It's up to all of us to go forth and execute. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Vice Admiral Adams, for joining us today, for sharing your perspective, and also for joining us at the event this morning. Now we are going to move on to the fun part of the program. Not that the rest was not fun, but we get to hear from the council members themselves. These folks have incredible backgrounds, incredible insights, but most importantly, they've got servants' hearts, and they are very excited to take the words that are in this strategy, and like the Vice Admiral Adams said, we're going to put this into action and we're going to execute this. So with that, I want to open this up for the next hour. We're going to deliberate. I'm going to give a bunch of questions to these folks here, and I would just say for those of you around the table, just when you answer a question, just give your name and a little bit of the background. I know folks around the room probably know you, but it would be good to know what experiences you're bringing to the table. So the first question that I'm going to pitch, one of the actions that HHS is taking to implement the National Youth Sports Strategy is to reinstate the Science Board as a subcommittee of this council. It's what Admiral Giroir touched on briefly, as with Katrina. The Science Board will provide scientific guidance as directed by the council members. So my first question is, what topic areas do you think the Science Board should focus on to help implement this strategy?
Hi, I'm Brenda Becker, work for Boston Scientific and have been in healthcare for a very long time and very committed to health and fitness, especially with our youth. One of the things I was thinking about and had seen a recent article about, so many kids are not engaged for a number of reasons, but one is they're sitting behind the Xbox or the internet. And there are some games out there that apparently get kids hiking and doing a number of activities. And I just don't know what the science data really is on that. It might be interesting to look. Is there a way through the technology and through these games, if it does have any kind of cause and effect? I've heard some, but I think the samples have been small, to look at how do we use technology, these games, to get kids doing the actual activities they're seeing on the video.
Hi, Dr. Robert Goldman. I have 4 medical doctorates and 20 world strength records, so I know both ends from the medical and from the sports arena. I think one area that is very concerning to me and has been for quite some time is the nutrition aspect. The companies are supported for bad foods and they're punished for good foods. And if you don't put the right fuel in the engine, you're going to have a deficient machine. And I think we are pushing our kids, not only due to the inactivity, but also due to the programming that we see, what they're being programmed on YouTube and all the different things that they're watching during their daily lives, that to be pushed bad foods, bad substances, too many of the wrong types of fuels in their body. And when you combine inactivity with bad fuel, you end up with a broken machine. And that's why you have a lot of childhood obesity, childhood diabetes, all of these different deficiencies, not only in the U.S., but I see this internationally, where childhood obesity all throughout Asia now, in China and so on, aside from the toxic environment of the bad air, bad water, all of these things, this toxic soup now combines to not only affect their bodies, but also their brains. So we're going to see more of these chronic conditions increasing if we do not change the fuel that's going in and their activities, as was just brought up.
This is Shauna Robach. I have to echo what Dr. Goldman said. I think there's just a huge lack of knowledge when it comes to nutrition. Just looking at my own family, my sister ended up getting these bars, and because it said fiber in it, she thought they were healthy, and I asked her to pick up a Snickers bar, and they had almost the exact same nutrition within them. So I think educating them on that is pretty important.
Julie Tier with Boys and Girls Clubs of America, and a lot of the data that we talked about today and that I think we're all familiar with is really, it's startling right? And you just think about 71% of our teens or young adults wouldn't even qualify for military service. I mean, that is something I don't think, we know it at Boys and Girls Clubs. We've had a long time partnership with the military. But when you share that statistic with people, they say, no, that can't be right. What are you talking about, right? And I just think there's so much information, there's so much data, and if the Science Board can really help us consolidate, and if there's 3 key points that can really help us sharpen our case, both about the problem but also the solutions, right? Because that's the good news here, is that we do know there are solutions out there that work. But I think that we've really got in a world where it's, bring your data, right? We've really got to consolidate what are the most compelling data points, but also what works, right? And so organizations like ours, the Y, many other youth-serving organizations, schools, and other organizations can really help to solve this problem with you all.
Yeah, Trevor Drinkwater, I agree with that point. I think, somebody told me once, we all can have an opinion, but there's only one set of facts. And I think, unfortunately, there are a lot of set of facts when it comes to what's happening with health and wellness right now. So I think one of the things the Science Board could do is help be that convening agent of all this information to try to have that one set of facts that we can all rely on, because it's hard to refute facts, and when you show facts, people typically move and move things forward. So I agree. I think that's one of the big roles the Science Board could take.
Jim Worthington. No question the facts in this report is going to be essential, but I think the delivery of those facts and getting it to the parents and the schools, that's really the key. How do you get it to filter down to them so they can be aware that there's a national crisis, amongst us right now, and how do we deal with it, and how do you deal with your own family and kids and extended family members? So I think that's critical. You can have all the reports you want, but if you don't deliver it, then you got a whole nother issue.
Johnny Damon, former baseball player and father of 8 kids. I could tell a difference from my 20-year-olds down to the 3-year-old. The younger kids are definitely trying to get on their iPads a lot more, and I'm pushing them outside to play. The iPads or any device, it's taking a lot of their time away from playing sports. If you do play a video game, I suggest that Xbox Connect. I mean, I did it with my older kids, and we got a great workout. We were doing track and field. We were doing all that good stuff. And I lost out on a stolen base because I played it so much one night. I was running in place, and my body wasn't moving, so I got thrown out at second base. So that video game was actually very beneficial to my older kids, and but the younger kids, we need safer places for them to play as well. But getting outside and playing in multiple sports, but also the parents, and you need to be there. You need to push them in the right direction.
Master Sergeant Rob Wilkins of United States Air Force, retired. I think the country really went through this. We were debating about chicken sandwiches recently from Chick-fil-A and Popeyes. And that was how people were getting their nutrition information. That's the kind of stuff we're talking about. I think that the information is pretty complex, but we have to make it more simplistic, where most people can understand. I was recently in Harlem with Ashley, and I was talking to some of the kids, and I found that many of them were eating at McDonald's and Burger King because it cost $1 to have a hamburger. They don't have $1.50 or $2 to buy bananas and apples. So the price of good food is restrictive. But I also think the schools have to have a part in this, where they're teaching about nutrition, and maybe these kids go back and teach their parents, because the parents are so under stress, they're working so hard, but kids need to be a part of this. Personally, my own son, he preferred to go to Panera now than McDonald's. I want to go to McDonald's because that's how I grew up. But I think the more that we get our kids involved, the more that we get people who are the people sharing the messages, but to break it down so everyone can understand it, it'll have a good way of reaching home and making a positive impact.
Well, I think these are all really good points, and moving on to, You know, say we have a great set of data across all of these topics. What are we going to do to increase awareness? When we have the data set, we've got a science board together, they're going to look at a few topics. How can we be involved in increasing the awareness of these facts, of these benefits of youth sports, of what the problem is and what the solutions are?
I think I'm the only one that
This
hasn't
is,
gone yet, so
oh, go ahead.
I'm going to
You
catch
wanna
you,
go
Trevor. Ashley Lundvall, I was Miss Wheelchair USA 2013 and just an outdoor enthusiast with adaptive recreation. Whether we like technology or not, it's not going anywhere anytime soon. And so I think if we want to reach kids and young people right now, whether we like it or not, we have to utilize social media. It's where they're out, it's what they're checking. Unfortunately, it's kind of the only way they know how to communicate right now. And so whether you like it or not, like I said, it's not going anywhere and it's a great way to reach them. There's a lot of interactive tools as well as accessibility tools that you can reach people in that way. And so I think that's something that we could all utilize, and it's a platform that everyone's able to have access to.
And if we're reaching kids on social media, how are we encouraging them to get from behind the screen to the great outdoors?
Yeah, so I think the number is that our kids see 4,000 media impressions a day. So it's pretty incredible. I think the challenge here is to make sure those media impressions inspire them to do the right thing and not the wrong thing. There are a lot of big companies out there that spend a lot of money trying to get us to buy their products and are more and more focused on corporate responsibility initiatives because they know now that the consumers reward companies that are doing better things for them. So I think a big area for us to focus on is really how do we leverage these big companies and their desire to communicate a more positive message towards nutrition, fitness, mental wellness, physical health, mental health, to influence as many of those impressions that our kids are seeing today, and also, again, their parents. There's also on the board itself an incredible amount of social media followings, like to follow Johnny, for example. So, and people who make these, that have this influence should use it positively to try to drive people to do the right thing. So I think there's a big opportunity for us as a council and also through our networks to be able to communicate positively what we're trying to accomplish.
I also think competition within your schools, your cities, like who's going to get outside and compete more? Give them a prize, whether it's I'm from Orlando, so guess what? Whatever school wins this competition, you all go to SeaWorld today or Disney, or give incentives for these kids to, because, Disney tickets are $150 now for these kids, but we need to reach out to these big corporations that actually have the money to, because at the end of the day, it's money. It's, when I played baseball growing up, it cost $20. Now, it's upwards to $700 to $1,500 to sign up for baseball, and that's pretty ridiculous. And I think that's what's going on with most sports. I guess we were fortunate. For me to make $20 back in the day, it's cutting some grass and getting outdoors again. But it all revolves around money. But I like the competition, incentives for these kids, whether it's on a local, state, national competition. I think it would be great to develop some kind of an app to have these kids compete and do the best that they can.
I think we discussed this last year as well in September. Finding people that relate to those age groups is key. I had the fortune to be with Willie Mays, who's 88 years old, a couple weeks ago, and spent 3 hours in the afternoon. He's my childhood hero. Willie Mays today could not relate to kids that are 13 or 12 or 14. Johnny Damon could, but people like him and entertainers and people like that would get the message out that, being healthy, being active is cool, fun, a great thing to do. I own a pretty large health club facility in Philadelphia, outside Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And believe it or not, Zumba is what attracts all the young girls, 13, 14, 15, 16. They won't play a youth sport, but they'll come in and keep active through that. And then in hopes you might get them active through youth sports. But let's be honest, at the end of the day, whether it's sports or just participating, moving is what we're all about. So I think you just have to find those role models. I can't tell you who they are. I happen to be 63 years old, but the people that those kids look up to, I think, are the people we need to get to solicit that help.
Yeah, Shauna, like Johnny said, I think, sports these days, they are fairly expensive, and I think there's a lot of parents out there that don't want to put that money towards their child, and I think, they don't realize the benefits that go along with that, and I think also educating those parents might get them out there to, push their child to get out on the field and put that money towards them. So I think targeting the parents in those media outlets and other ways could work as well.
Another thing I would think about is encouraging the parents to be the example for their children. When we're looking at social media influencers or others, I think most children, they may look at the person who lives in their household as their prime role model, as the person they want to emulate the most. So if you're a parent, maybe you don't have to go to the gym, but you walk around the block, you throw the ball, and you start building on that foundation to now you start going to the gym and you lift weights. But the child's number one role model should be their parent, in my opinion, and that in our house we try to make sure that we're telling our child to exercise, but he sees his mom and dad also exercising. So it's one thing to say do it, but the other thing is to participate in that same activity or many activities.
I know we've talked about how everyone has a role to play. Parents, coaches, youth, the government, you all in your industries, respective industries. It's really a cultural problem and a cultural shift of changing behavior and targeting different audiences. If you put on the hats from your different industries, what kind of audiences do you think you can be targeting to help increase awareness?
So I'll jump in here. I've been giving this some thought, and being in corporate America, I think with corporate sustainability and responsibility that is really starting to take form in this country, this would be a good one to put in front of CEOs, whether it be through the Business Roundtable, through some of the other CEO-type groups, to say this is a crisis and corporate America needs to be a part of this. And I think we need to start educating them. I'm going to take on some of that myself. How can they be involved? How can they help support this, fund this, open up their campuses? They all have gyms. How can we get them more involved?
A lot of us, when we were growing up, the President's Council was it. I mean, having the little badge, I mean, that's so, I mean, wow, and we see the badges again. I think that there are a lot of great sports festivals that we need to get the council visual appearance at again, some of which that are double the size of the Olympics in terms of competing athletes. And I'm involved in a number of them, and a number of the other committee members are as well. And I think that it would be really great to almost rebirth the Sports Council, because we all knew the President's Council when we were growing up, all of us. We grew up with it. It was like from age 12, we wanted that little badge, and we'd be doing our sit-ups and push-ups till that's probably why I did a world record. I couldn't stop. And I think we need to get that exposure to this next generation at the actual sports festivals, where these kids are going, where there are 200,000 people or 100,000 people showing up, and you have 22,000 athletes competing, not just showing up, actually in competition. I think these are the things that we need to almost rebirth the Sports Council again, because many of this generation have forgotten about it. They don't know it like we did. It was part of our lives growing up, and we don't have physical education in the schools as a requirement, so it's a different world.
Can we take the rope climb off that president's badge? I could never do that.
And just for the record, can you tell everyone what the record is of the sit-ups?
13,500 back then, but straight leg, the old way. It was more painful.
I think corporate America is going to get behind this, because I recently saw a statistic where it said 94% of female CEOs have a sport background, and 75% of all CEOs have a sport background. And that's where many of them learned lessons of teamwork. That's where many of them had friends of diverse backgrounds. That's where they learned about dedication and pushing through hardships and pain. So I think corporate America, once we engage in the proper way, I think they're going to be on board, because they're all familiar with sports and the importance sports has played in their lives.
The buzzword I was looking for is corporate social responsibility, the CSR, which so many companies are engaging in, would be right down that alley, so I agree with you.
It was pretty amazing seeing the Washington Nationals plays today. The youth baseball. I've never seen that, and I played on 7 different teams, and no one thought about putting no team thought about doing it, and they're the people who are going to engage the community to get kids excited. Hopefully every team one day decides to do that, not just baseball, but the soccer teams and the football teams, even colleges, to uplift certain areas. And I mean, I could be stepping out of bounds a little bit, but we talk about paying college players. I mean, this is a good way for them to make a little bit of extra money, to go to their local high schools and middle schools to talk to these kids about getting good grades. I mean, you have to have good grades to get a scholarship. I mean, there is free college for everyone. And even if you're not a great athlete, there's many different avenues you can take. You can find a job taking tours around the stadium. You can become an agent. You can become a GM. I mean, there's so many different avenues except being very good in sports, but you have to find your love in it, and that's what we're trying to get kids out there to do, is participate, and you're finding your love sometime.
I also represent the global health club industry, IHRSA, the largest trade association. And in the U.S. alone, there's tens of thousands of health clubs. And I think they've been slow to the party in that respect that they've always tried to market to adults. And they're now starting to change the pendulum, realizing that youth programming, getting kids in early, providing activities in their club, because they're going to be the customers of the future. And what you won't get them when they're 40 years old, typically, when they haven't worked out for 30 years. But if you could get them to create healthy lifestyle activities, they'll stay with it. And so in our industry, we are trying to do that, and more clubs are providing those opportunities for kids. So I see that as a positive to change that. Ironically, the adult penetration rate in health club participation, with all the new clubs like Planet Fitness and so on and so forth, Orange Theory, has remained the same for the last 5 years. So we're hoping that this new change in the pendulum will bring more participation, not only with kids, but adults.
That is a very good segue into the public-private partnerships. So a dual question here: how might you utilize public-private partnerships, and who are you working with that may be interested in working with the council to implement this strategy?
Well, I just mentioned IHRSA. So again, it's the largest global trade association in the world, health club trade association in the world. Domestically, we started working on this last year with the council. Somewhere along the line, things kind of slowed up, but I'd like to see us re-engage that. I know that I spoke at the UN like 8 months ago about inclusivity and fitness. We should be talking about opening our doors to youth, whether it be 7th grade or 8th grade, providing them an opportunity, whether it's a month, a week, 2 months, to come and use our clubs free. Come up with a program where we introduce kids to fitness. Those kids that are fit typically play sports or will stay in sports. They become part of a team, a tribe of people that work out together, all the benefits you can think of. So I think if we started out with the 40,000 health clubs that are in the United States, we would have a good step up to provide something that would be pretty unique. And to give credit where credit due, the YMCA actually has a program where as all 7th graders get memberships. So they're doing great things. We need the private sector to step up and do their best.
As I travel and talk to people about athletics and adaptive sports and things like that, one of the huge kind of barriers that people with disabilities face sometimes is just the adaptive equipment. And a lot of times, insurance companies don't consider that a necessity, and so it's not covered. And so I would love to be able to work with insurance companies and get them to understand, you know, if you'll help us cover this adaptive equipment, it's going to make people healthier. It's going to give them those opportunities. Unfortunately, the funding is not always there. And I think a lot of times, especially maybe smaller schools like that, can get intimidated by that extra cost or to think that they have to have this entire program. And it's like, no, sometimes people just need the equipment and then they're going to get out there and be inclusive and play with everyone else. And so I know it's a tall order, but I think that that's definitely an industry that needs to be worked with and kind of coached through the idea that we are, at the end of the day, going to make everyone healthier if they have all that access. And so I think it's something that definitely needs to be addressed.
That just prompted me to think about, you know, First Tee. A lot of clubs will just, you know, donate to First Tee. You know, my club is bring in your golf clubs you're not using and whatever. And how do we do that with all sports? And maybe it's happening and I don't know about it, but I just was doing the purge in my garage after my kids have moved out and there's basketballs and all this stuff. And I didn't know what to do with them. I gave them the goodwill, but could have they gone to a program? So we got to start thinking about how do we, like you were just saying with baseball, with that facility, but how do you get the baseball teams to reach out to the community, say, bring us your baseball bats, bring us your balls, and we're going to distribute them to those in need for the reasons, actually, you were just talking about, too.
Yeah, there's definitely some wealthier areas, and they always seem to buy new baseball equipment. Well, their old equipment is still very good, and I grew up in South Orange, Orlando, and we couldn't afford these bats, so maybe the higher up clubs can start donating all their equipment, and but we do have to find a way to get it to the right people. Yeah, you don't want to give a bat to someone who is going to use it for the wrong reasons and or whatnot. So it's really difficult. I know.
On the public side of it, public-private side of it, I think there's a lot of opportunity to figure out ways to incentivize the groups to work together. One of the festivals that I run is focused on wellness, and we have over 100 sponsors that are big major CPG companies, that consumer products companies that have over 700,000 employees, sell $300 billion worth of products here in the U.S. and market those products to, you know, millions of consumers. And I think there's a lot of power in getting in really partnering with these organizations that want to have a healthier workforce and to lower their healthcare costs and also to make a happier, healthier workforce that services the customers that they all service. So I think there's a tremendous opportunity to see if there's a way to work with these companies in a more direct fashion. I think a lot of these companies try to do it on their own, which is good. A lot of times they don't get credit for the work that they're doing in terms of the work, the policies they're putting in place for their employees or the things that they're doing to try to incent their customers to do more things on the healthy side, whether that's eating better or getting out and being more active. So I think there's a big opportunity there to try to collaborate with some of these big companies, figure out ways to build those incentives.
Well, and to Trevor's point, what is amazing, for every dollar spent in preventative, there's a $3 to $4 payment on the back end. And the fact that we haven't pounded that through to corporations to make them understand that that's a tremendous value for what, I mean, if I can invest $1 and get $3 back, I'm doing that all day long. So, you know, it's, again, educating, getting in these companies, working with it, and for that matter, incentivizing exercise. There's state and federal legislation out there now that could help to defray some of the costs of some of the things that have to do with youth sports and sports leagues and things like that. So we need to look at all the different things that makes sports more affordable. I mean, one of the things that in the packet here is that the cost is prohibitive. If you have 3 kids and, you know, one's on a travel team and it's $300 a month, guess who suffers? It's 2 kids that aren't as, quote, good. I mean, that's not only unfair, that's just sad. And to be able to have to make that choice is sad. But when people are, you know, limited income or, you know, middle-class family making X amount of dollars a year, they're faced with those choices. I have a sports training facility that we have, you know, thousands of kids come to every year. A third of them I scholarship because I can, but most businesses can't. So those kids are turned away. I let them come for free. So, I mean, it's a shame, but there's choices being made between what kid is going to play what and what family, and that shouldn't happen.
I completely agree with you. Those are very good points. Another very important part of this piece is volunteerism. Where are we getting people, maybe who have a background in the military or who are older residents? How are we getting them involved, and how are we finding volunteers? How are we incentivizing them to be mentors to kids? How are we mobilizing this untapped resource?
So when I was coaching and I signed up to coach, it was a little daunting. I played basketball, but I didn't know how to coach basketball and what different levels of kids. So one of the things I had wanted the school to do was build a model program so that a coach could go in and pull out the fourth grade and say, this is what I'm supposed to teach them, so that you're building a program and you feel less intimidated to go in there and coach, because it doesn't come naturally to everybody. They might not have played the sport, but they want to be helpful. So I think if we built some programs and examples that schools could adopt and get it out to them, because there's a lot of, the parent-teacher associations, and our school, you had to have 40 hours of volunteering as a parent, or you had to pay X amount of dollars. So there was an incentive, but people didn't always sign up to do the coaching type jobs. So I think that would be really important. And we just got to get the message out in communities, especially with our aging population. I could probably do it, but I don't even know, you don't know where to go necessarily and who needs it. So we got to figure out a way that communities reach out, especially I think to the aging population that are finding more time on their hands that could do it. But I don't have the answer to how you go about that. Others in the room, brighter than me, might be able to figure that out.
While I'm not exactly sure how to find them, I do know the impact of coaches. So many times you speak to children and you say, why did you quit your sport? And it's a coach. The coach was not good. The coach was hollering at me. The coach was mean. Recently, I read a report about people, coaches have made impacts on people that they remember 50, 60 years later. I was recently at the Pentagon talking to some military leaders, and they were saying that the military is now speaking to coaches because the coaches are having more of an impact than some of the teachers and the parents. So the coaches play a dramatic and positive impact, or they can also play a negative impact. So teaching, giving instruction, finding ways to educate the folks, because many coaches are parents. They coach because their kids are involved, but it doesn't often mean that they're the best qualified. They just have compassion or passion for their children and other children. So education, finding the right qualified folks, and letting the coaches know that you're going to make an impact on this child that can last 50 years plus. So it's important that you do the right thing.
Just to add on to what you just said, what I had done is I called George Mason University close by and got one of the coaches to come over and talk to the parents that were all volunteering to talk about coaching. So that's another thing we could do, is start partnering with college coaches and high school coaches that are paid and do it for a living. Some of those guys aren't very good either, but find the good ones and start using them, and maybe even do a video that you can send out to schools, say, here's a great on coaching.
Sometimes when the coaches are trying to teach these kids, I know the parents have to get involved, but the parents also create the, my son's better. He should be hitting fourth. He should be pitching. He should be doing all that. So you do run into those issues sometimes, but as a parent, you need to also understand that these coaches are there trying to help out as much as possible, and calm down sometimes.
If we were able to snap our fingers and change the culture and maybe the roles that both coaches and parents play, if we're trying to create a space where kids aren't playing just to compete, but they're playing to learn, to build character, to do better in school, all these other benefits we've been talking about, what in your minds would be the ideal role of the coach and the ideal role of the parent, if we could swipe it and start from scratch?
You'd never let a coach coach his own kid. I mean, it's unbearable at times. And trust me, I used to coach too, and I found myself walking that fine line. I mean, you want your kid to do well, but on the flip side, sometimes you feel like you're maybe doing that at expense. And let's be honest with you, if there's 15 kids on a team, there's probably 1 or 2 are the best, and the other ones are, go down from there. So we've got to invert the pyramid and start worrying about the kids that are, not as quite as good. I hate to use the word good, but not as accomplished, and work backwards. But when you have parents that are just there to promote their kids, and I have no idea how you do that other than just say maybe they can't coach their own. But that probably wouldn't work either. So I think that's the biggest thing, as Johnny said it. I see that. Again, we have that even in. We do sports training for kids, get them, through plyometrics and things like that. Literally, there'll be parents. We had to ban the parents from watching their kids work out because they were saying they weren't working hard, give more effort, this and that. They were just there training for an hour, trying to become better athletes. So it goes even to that extent. It's really insane at times.
Many organizations have code of conduct, and I think schools and organizations are starting to implement code of conducts because of parents being so unbearable. You almost want to ban them, but they want to come watch their kids, hand them the whistle themselves. You take over if you think you can do it so well. But I think maybe a code of conduct that maybe the council can put together on what is appropriate sports behavior. I'm sure there's models out there all over the place, and start sending them out and putting them on the social media channels and things we've talked about, so others say, oh, that's a good idea, I'll do it at my school or my organization.
Personally, for me, when all this stuff is going to start in a couple years, I'm going to coach, but I'm going to make sure all the parents volunteer, get out there and kick the ball with your kid, come coach with me for a game. If you're going to yell at me, why don't you make the lineup one day? And I plan to let every kid play every position and hit everywhere in the lineup, and don't necessarily play the best kid all the time. But that's what I'm planning on doing, to let everyone across America know that philosophy. I think it's going to be tough, but I'm personally going to get all the parents involved, and don't yell at me.
The key or the problem is that, and I think this might be an accurate statistic, I was told, but correct me if I'm wrong, that 70% of kids at the age of 13 start to drop off of youth sports. So that's when it starts to get real competitive. So what can you do? I'm throwing this out there. What can you do to, once you get to the junior high, high school level where it is about making a team, what can you do to allow those kids to continue to participate? Because all of a sudden they don't play or they don't make the team. That's where the big drop-off is. And I think that's something we need to look at as a council to figure out, well, what the heck can you do? And now even in schools, they make you pay to play. So, I mean, so there's not money in the budget to have these kids play, well, whether it be intramurals or a second JV team or something like that. So I think that's a real problem in the schools, that once they get to that age, they just stop.
Well, I know our focus is sports, and so obviously I don't want to take away from that, but we also have to understand that not every kid is going to want to play sports. And so it's like if we have kids that are dropping off, like Jim said, at the age of 13, it's like, okay, well, in some cases, yes, they need the support to get back in, but then some kids just don't want to play sports. So maybe let's give them another alternative to still stay active, but doesn't necessarily have to be sports. And like I said, I know that's the priority of this council, and I don't want to downgrade that at all. But, there's so much diversity out there, and so many people have different interests, and they're able to stay active and healthy. Maybe it's not on a sports team. Maybe there's another option for that kid too. And so I think we have to be careful making it an all or nothing statement, like you're going to play sports on this team or you have no physical activity at all. So maybe coming up with some ideas for people, instead of just cutting those kids loose and saying, well, if you're not going to play sports, that's kind of it for you. Maybe give them some other ideas to stay active. Maybe give them some ideas of something they can do independently on their own. I'm fortunate we live in Wyoming, and so you just go outside and walk around, and it's miles to get everywhere, and so it keeps you active. But at the same time, giving kids ideas of ways to stay active if they don't necessarily make the team or if they need another option like that, I think would be a good idea as well.
Do we have the ability to expand the role of the President's Council to include the kids that aren't sports interested to keep them active, or is that just the focus?
Absolutely. I know the youth sports strategy touches mainly on sports participation, but the bottom line is for the long-term health benefits of these kids. And how are we doing that in nutrition? How are we doing it in sports? But mainly, how are we making kids active?
Okay.
Absolutely. I wanted to mention, if anyone is on the phone that wants to jump in or has any thoughts, please feel free. All right. So the next question I have for you guys is, what are ways, maybe beyond what we've discussed here, just thinking about the implementation of the youth sports strategy, what is in your field, in your area of expertise, kind of the poignant problem that you see, and what is the proposed solution?
One of the problems I see is that the coaches, the parents, and the children often don't have the same goals. So Aspen Institute did a study, and the number one attribute that kids want from sports is to have fun. Number 48 for the coaches is to have fun. The number one attribute the coaches want is to win. The parents fall all in between. So what we do for our son's football team is the parents and the coaches and the kids all have one meeting in the beginning of the season, and we kind of talk about what the goals are of this team. And the first goal is to have fun, to become unified as a family, and to learn different attributes of sports. Then the parents and the coaches meet weekly on Thursday, because after a Saturday football game, the coaches have heard some parents screaming things that they shouldn't be screaming during the game. So we try to clean that up, but I think constant communication is the key. The coaches, the kids, and the parents all have a role in this. They all might not have the same goal, but the bottom line is we want these kids to have a great experience, because sports means so much to them and means a lot to the parents, who often have to get off for work early. They're sacrificing so much of their resources, and no one wants to have a bad time. So having constant communication and being engaged with the team is really, really important to having a good experience for the families, for the coaches, but more importantly, for that athlete.
I think we've already kind of said it. It's the quality of coaches. I know I've had a bunch of parents ask, how can I get involved? But at the same time, they're intimidated by stepping in and trying to coach. I know when I started coaching from an athlete, transitioning from an athlete to a coach, it took me a couple of years to try and, like you said, you played basketball, but it was hard to coach it. So I think some type of mentorship program that you put together to attach to quality coaches within the area, or like Brenda had said, at least some type of pamphlet or something to teach them kind of what we're trying to get out there for the kids, and and obviously about the sport. So, but I think the quality of coaches is a problem.
One of the things I've heard a lot today, and we've talked about in the past, is cost being a problem. And we've talked about a number of things today. You brought up the facilities and teams getting involved, but we have HSAs that a lot of people have now, and we only use it for emergency, for doctor bills and that. It'd be great if we could find a way. I think there's some initiatives out there now being considered, because it has to be fixed by Congress under the tax laws, but to use that for sports, fitness, activities. It doesn't even have to be a sport, but if they could use those pre-tax dollars to do that, I think it would be extremely helpful to most families who do have that and could use it.
Along with what Brenda was talking about, and again, I was just getting up to speed, Norway somehow gets 8 out of 10 kids participating in sports. Now, they fund it through gaming and some other things, but they found a way, and which is amazing to me. I could see where maybe they would get 6 out of 10 or 5 out of 10, but 8 out of 10 kids in Norway will play a sport because somehow it's funded through those initiatives, and money is an issue. I mean, there's an example. So maybe that's a model we need to look at just to get some ideas. I'm not saying we're going to adopt that for any but it seems like that is making a huge difference.
And I know we've talked about coaches a lot, we talked about parents, we talked about kids. Are there any other groups that we can really target here?
Why not target Congress and the Senate, get them to kick a lot more money into this? That would be nice.
Make it permanent with an endowment.
Well, it is interesting. In my city, Philadelphia, they now tax soda, and it's been a big controversial thing. So we're taxing soda. You would think they could turn around and use that money to utilize it for healthy lifestyle activities, right? Give it back, put it into the parks, the fields, and things like that. I have no idea what they do with the money, probably just trying to balance their budget. But at the end of the day, I mean, again, if we're going to try to discourage unhealthy activities, why don't we encourage healthy activities? And honestly, I mean, the way things are going, you can't really get a pill and get your way out of this healthcare crisis. So we have to find a way to get people active. It's alarming that 70% of the kids cannot serve in the military. Now, can you imagine 40 years from now when they're adults, the cost to maintain them and to keep them healthy? I mean, it's unbelievable. Will it be 90% of the people? I mean, if it's that bad now, Johnny, what you said about your little kid versus your 20-year-old, that's alarming. It's only getting worse. So we got to find a way to put a halt to this and find a way to get the people moving, just moving.
Jim is definitely right. When I lectured in China on a number of occasions, because their cities have become toxic due to so much pollution and the way that they're getting rid of waste, no country in the world can afford to be a nation of nursing homes. You just cannot afford it. You cannot afford to maintain the chronic diseases of aging, especially since when people have chronic diseases, they spend their entire fortunes that they've worked their whole life in the last year or 2 years of life. So instead of a gradual, staying at your peak your whole life and then dropping off, they have this gradual decline, and so they spend all of that money. And so we as a country definitely cannot afford to be a nation of nursing homes and of people who are chronically ill. You can't, no one can afford it. So if we don't retrain the brains and minds and bodies of these young people, it's an unsustainable situation in terms of healthcare, because it's already really bad.
So I want to leave us with two more questions. One is, we've talked about the different ways that you guys in your other roles can help to increase youth sports participation. We know that this is a federal strategy, and this is the first step, and the federal government can only do so much. But if we could just maybe list a couple ways of what HHS can do to be supportive in its federal position as you all as special government employees in the implementation of this strategy.
I think getting teachers involved. In our local, I live in Loudoun County, Virginia, and I spoke to some physical fitness teachers and some English teachers recently because I thought if I get this program where I have kids working out, how about I try to combine it to where they're writing about why they like exercise, why they like basketball, why they like football. So the two teachers that I spoke to loved the idea because now it's going to give this child, besides the physical fitness part, it's going to give them the confidence that they're writing well, that they're speaking well. And so what we're going to do is we're going to have an event at a local gym, and we're going to have them come in, and they're going to perform push-ups and jumping jacks and sit-ups, and then 2 or 3 of them are going to pick out why they like to exercise, what exercise means to them, what football has brought to them, and they're going to get graded for this. So I think it's giving them the benefits of communication. It's giving them the ability to think on their feet. It's giving them some health benefits. But I'm trying to find different ways to engage them in exercise, and so far it seems to be, at least there's lots of interest. We'll see how successful it will be.
So there's been a lot discussed. This is, those who haven't read it yet, it's a great, it covers everything. but we can't do everything, and you can't. You have limited team with a lot of other priorities here in the federal government. Having worked before, I know. I would recommend we with the team at HHS, sort through what are the first 3 things that we can really focus on in the first 6 months of the strategy. Because if you try to do it all, we'll accomplish nothing. So that would be my recommendation, that your team at HHS is so qualified and has done so much of this, to come back to us and say, here's what we're recommending that we focus on, and how can we be helpful and keep us engaged, because we're all motivated and ready to go. But we can't all just be out there going every which way.
I think getting these partnerships, these public-private partnerships, would be a good way to do it. Again, I go back to my industry where there's 40,000 health clubs in America. I mean, if you could get a quarter of them to buy into, providing something, there would be a big thing. And then there's all the other partnerships you can do. And also thinking, well, here, I guess in a little while, but the National Fitness Foundation, the work that they're going to do, I think is going to be key to providing opportunities for, low-cost or low-income communities and places that are rural that don't get the funding they need to provide these programs. So, and we saw that today down at the ice hockey rink and the ball fields. I mean, they're just model programs. So the more we make awareness and get people to buy into that stuff, I think we can make a bigger impact quicker.
Now, we only have a few more minutes, but I know we've talked about a lot of really good things. We've put a lot on the table, some of them problems, some of them solutions, some of them ideas. But I want to finish with, whoever has one, with a little bright spot, a little spot of hope, either an inspirational story of an interaction you've had with some of the folks who are already doing this, a program like the ones we saw earlier today, or maybe a positive statistic. But just a little bright spot of hope for the audience here from your personal experiences.
These are the fun ones, so I'll go. When I became a mom 9 years ago, I never in a million years dreamed about taking my daughter to a playground for the first time and her having a blast, but me not being able to participate with her because I was chasing her all over the place in my wheelchair in gravel and sawdust and all these other things that were supposed to be accessible. And I realized right off the bat that starting our kids at such a young age, keeping them active, is so vitally important, but that I couldn't participate with her. And I thought, well, if I as a parent can't do this, there's kids out there with physical disabilities that aren't able to go to a playground of all things and start that journey of being active. And so a couple of us got together in my small little town in Wyoming, and we said, you know what, we're gonna bring an all-inclusive playground to Wyoming. And it took about 4 years for us to raise all the money, but it was really fascinating to me when you got out in front of people, whether they were parents or grandparents, and everyone understood, guess what, we're all headed toward this aging population. One day you might want to be on a playground and play with your grandkids, and you're not going to be able to do it. And so getting personal with people, it was really fascinating to reach out to them in that way. And it doesn't seem like, you know, it happened very quickly. Like I said, it took about 4 years, but 2 years ago, we were able to open Wyoming's first all-inclusive playground. And a lot of people didn't even know what that meant. And so it was really cool to educate people. And now we've got another one that popped up in Wyoming, and I know there's a third one coming. And so it's fascinating when you find something that you're so personal to you, it's going to be personal to someone else too. And so if you can reach out to people about what you're passionate about and get them excited about it, it's really neat to see how that spreads. And who doesn't want to get on board with helping kids? I mean, that's just kind of a no-brainer. And so if you have an idea about something, no idea is too small, and one person can really make a difference. And so just finding what you're passionate about in order to help the kids stay active, no matter how crazy the idea might seem, don't give up on it, because like I said, little ideas like that can really turn into big things and impact a lot of people. And so that's just something that we've done there in our little town that's made a huge impact in our state.
One of our council members, I'll use as an example, Matt Hesse started an organization called FitOps Foundation, which I've got the honor of learning more about this year. It's been really inspiring to me. And the focus, I know our focus is on youth, but I think this has a cycling effect on youth as well. The foundation focuses on getting veterans back into being physically active. A lot of veterans come out of being serving in the military and grew up being extremely active, and that's what defined them. And then later on in life, they find themselves out of shape and maybe not in the same physical shape that they were in, which also hinders their ability and confidence when they're bringing up their kids to be physically fit. So Matt's organization tries to turn that around and actually takes veterans back into boot camp and gets them back into shape and actually certifies them to become personal trainers. And it's had a profound impact on these veterans and their families. I've personally been able to see some of the impact this year. So, I think organizations like that really focus on inspiring people to be physically fit and also get their families to be inspired as well are important programs.
I think it would be really neat if we can identify some social media stars. I mean, we just had a big sports festival, had about 70,000 people, and there was a line of like thousands of people online to meet with some social media fitness person who was nobody. They were just a YouTube star. They have millions and millions of followers. I don't know why, but they do. And you have an MMA, UFC champion here, line of 100 people. This line, 3,000 people. It was insane. So maybe if we identify some of these individuals who have these massive followings of millions of people, why I don't know, but they do, I think, and they start doing the exercises and they start, hey kids, you need to do this. They'll buy the shoes, they'll buy the hat, and they'll do the exercise. Beats me. I was shocked when I couldn't believe it.
A simple idea, which I did in my own neighborhood, was to ask my neighbors to start exercising, because since they knew that I was on the President's Council, I said, it doesn't have to be a walk. It can be mowing the lawn. It can be walking to the Starbucks instead of riding. So what I decided to do after I saw many of them exercising, I made a certificate. And I put the logo on it, and I put my name on it, and I just encouraged them to keep exercising and to become fitness advocates. And then some of the members have seen here on the council that I start posting it on my own Facebook and Instagram. Well, now many people in the neighborhood want the certificate. They want to be recognized. They want to be thanked for exercising. And I think it was just a very simple idea that doesn't cost me much, but now it's almost a challenge in the neighborhood. Did you get a certificate? If you haven't, there's a way to get it. And so it can be swimming, it can be running, but whatever makes you physically fit or physically active, I'm glad to recognize it, from our baseball teams to our basketball teams to, I saw a lady rolling in her wheelchair, and I can't wait to give her a certificate.
Well, thank you all. That concludes the deliberation portion, and thank you guys for sharing your ideas and insights. I know we've got a lot of work to do in the coming months and a lot of ideas that we're going to share together.
So a few moments ago, Jim had identified the National Fitness Foundation as a potential partner, and we wanted to invite Mr. Clay Walker to the podium to tell a little bit about what the National Fitness Foundation has been doing in the last few years and how they will help us with the sports strategy. Clay?
Great. Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, council members. Really appreciate the dialogue there. And appreciate having an opportunity to speak to you this afternoon. Make sure I have this, which way? There we go. Who are we? So I'm Clay Walker, as Jennifer said. I'm the Executive Director of the National Fitness Foundation. The foundation is the only congressionally chartered nonprofit in the country, period, that is focused on youth sport, health, and fitness. We are also your charity. We're your activation arm, the opportunity for you guys to extend your work. Well, earlier this morning, or earlier this afternoon, Katrina and the team from ODPHP, here's your roadmap. This is fantastic work. It took a long time to get together. You've just mentioned it. Johnny mentioned it. Rob mentioned it. Rob Wilkins mentioned it. Everyone here. Jim Worthington has said, you need resources. So what are we going to do about that? Well, today we're launching this. This is intended to support the work of the council. This is intended to support the National Youth Sports Strategy. And Brenda mentioned this. This is intended to make this policy permanent. Let's have an endowment that extends past this term and the next term. By the way, a few of you have asked me, what happens when my term ends? Well, guess what? When your term ends, you automatically become an honorary board member of the National Fitness Foundation. So you're not done with me yet. Okay, so why an endowment? Endowments, you think about a university endowment. This is a national mechanism to support the work that you're doing. This supports the strategy. All the work that CDC did is critically important. We've got to find a way to support it. Who's going to benefit? You've all said it today. Kids, families, local communities. That's why this is incredibly critical. I think Jerome mentioned it during his remarks. This is something that impacts all Americans. This is a slide that we should spend a little bit of time looking at because the council has mentioned it and we've been talking in the crowd amongst ourselves at the break. We've got to have a partnership framework that brings stakeholders to the table. Corporate America, you've mentioned a few times. We need to invite them, and we are inviting them to participate. State foundations. We believe that we can't do this alone. We need states to stand up and do the same thing. We need California. We need Nevada. We need Maryland. We need Virginia. We need other states to do the same thing. You mentioned the NCAA, Johnny. Coaches, they're a great resource. NCAA is one of our best resources. They were pointed out, Ohio State, as a bright spot. They have assets. The Ohio State University that runs the life sport, they have more than $1 billion worth of athletic facilities. Well, there are 2,000 universities, Division I, II, and III around the country. I need your help to turn those into green spaces where they can all do the same thing, open their doors. NFHS, for those of you who don't know that organization, is the National Federation of State High Schools. There are 27,000 high schools. Earlier this week, I met with the YMCA, who's here in the audience, thank you, and they talked about their shared use agreements of what they're doing with local facilities. We need to engage the National Federation of State High Schools in those 27,000 schools so that they can get on board. Media and tech companies. We talked a little bit about, are they the enemy? We don't think so. We think they need to have a seat at the table. Ashley pointed that out, right? They can be someone that can help us. And I used to work for the NFL Players Association. We did a lot of research, and we know for a fact that kids that play Madden football are twice as likely to play real football as the kids that don't. So we can find a way for them to have a seat at the table. I mentioned the National Council of Youth Sports Organizations. NCYS is here today. They represent 50, 60 million kids. They need to have a seat at the table as we move forward with this. I've got Hall of Fame organizations. We're working with the Pro Football Hall of Fame. We just signed a partnership agreement with Minor League Baseball. 160 minor league baseball stadiums around the country. That's great access, great opportunity. In July of 2020, we're launching a program with minor league baseball called Youth Baseball Week in America. And we're going to go get more kids. We're going to get all of those clubs, all of those coaches, all of those communities on board to support the National Youth Sports Strategy. USOCs, we can't leave the USOC and the NGBs out. Pro sports leagues. I'm proud to say, I'm wearing my little Chargers bracelet today. The Chargers are announcing they're the first professional sports team to stand up and endorse the National Youth Sports Strategy. They are repurposing their weekend. It's the 60th anniversary of the Los Angeles Chargers this weekend. It's the 100th anniversary of the National Football League, and they're making a third pillar, and it's the National Youth Sports Strategy. They're doing an event Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Some team had to go first, and they were willing to go first. So, who do we have here? We've got organizations that have stood up and said, we will support you. We'll sign your pledge. We will be a supporter of the overall effort. They're all fabulous. I'm just going to point out a couple of them. AAU, we're very, very grateful because AAU was the first youth sports organization to stand up and to say, we're with you. They hadn't seen this document, but they believed in what HHS and ODP-HP and this council was doing, that they said, we're in. Not only did they say that they were in, they now run that Presidential Youth Fitness program that has been around for more than 50 years. So thank you, AAU, for stepping up on that. I mentioned states. the Florida Sports Foundation is the first state. They're launching their own endowment, their own effort in the state. If you're going to donate money in Florida, you're going to help kids, you want to help kids in your backyard. You talk about in Orange County, you talk about in Orlando, money that's raised there is going to go to support Florida youth sports programs. I already mentioned minor league baseball. I've got one here, PPF. And my friend Matt Stover, who's sitting in the front row, Matt played 20 years in the NFL. Johnny, he's like you. He's got a couple of rings, Super Bowl rings, not World Series rings. Matt runs an organization that has got 125 current and former coaches, athletes, and entertainers, and their foundations. So those are bright spots that are already out in the community. Those are role models that he's here because he's supporting this strategy and wants to get involved and wants to get engaged with this council, wants to get engaged with the overall strategy. A couple of other, thank you, Matt. Thank you. Two more that I'll point out here. Potomac soccer. A lot has been said about club soccer. It's too expensive. Kids can't afford it. Well, guess what? Club soccer is not going away. So let's find a way to work with them. Well, Potomac is one of those rare club organizations that has gone out of its way to create scholarships so that all kids, they do not turn kids down. That is what we need as a model for all club soccer. So thank you, Potomac, for doing that. Last, NBC Sports is our first media partner. NBC Sports is supporting us in numerous ways. They own a technology company called Sports Engine. They're here today. Sports Engine has tens of millions of families in their system. You're talking about social media. Well, Sports Engine has already stood up and said, we will convey this message over and over and over to our audience, tens of millions of people that are engaged, and we will work with you to extend and expand that message beyond the people that are in our system, because they are committed to it. And they are bringing to bear not just their Sports Engine assets, but also their assets with NBC Sports. So I'm going to go through a few firsts. We've got some firsts here. We've got Max Scherzer, who was the first professional athlete to sign the pledge. Herschel Walker is there. John Harbaugh, first coach. It's kind of small, but we'll go through those. The first charitable foundation to support us, the Players Philanthropy Fund. The first college coach to sign the pledge to support this, Rob Scarlatta from Georgetown University. We got our first high school football coach last week, Andy Stefanelli from Our Lady of Good Counsel. And last night, we hosted the first member of Congress to sign the American Youth Sports Pledge, Madeline Dean. We've also got the first council member to sign it. I'm going to call that a tie between Herschel Walker and Jim Worthington, who also co-hosted our first fundraiser in Dallas with Mary Owen from the Ralph Wilson Foundation. First professional sports league, I mentioned minor league baseball. First pro sports team, the LA Chargers. The first Fortune 500 company, Brenda, thank you, Boston Scientific, who stood up before there was a published strategy. More than 6 months ago, they said, we're in, so thank you. And I mentioned already AAU, the first youth sport organization to stand up and to support the National Youth Sports Strategy. So we've talked about options. How do people get involved? Well, you've touched on, this group has touched on a lot of the areas of focus. Our areas of focus, coaches and volunteers. We need more of them. We've talked about how critical they are. That's one area. Girls programs and the outcomes that girls have from sport participation cannot be discounted. That's a second area of focus. Facilities. Some people call it venues, some people call it facilities, you can call it infrastructure. I'm not sure who mentioned Rob, maybe Congress. This is an infrastructure bill that everybody should support. We need to make sure that there are facilities and access. Equipment, goes without saying, you can't play without it. And the last one, the Presidential Youth Fitness Program, that program does not get one single federal dollar. And we need to change that. because we still believe that program, those patches, those certificates are valuable, and it's a valuable way to reach kids. So going through here, coaches and volunteers, they're the backbone of the youth sports ecosystem. So without quality coaches, youth sport participation opportunities are going to decrease. We know that. So we've got to focus on that. Where the program's going, we're aiming to recruit, and I mentioned YMCA. YMCA has millions of volunteers. AAU has millions of volunteers. Boys and Girls Club has millions of volunteers. Let's not reinvent the wheel. We're inviting YMCA to participate, to have a seat at the table. We're inviting AAU to participate and have a seat at the table because they are experts. Rob, you mentioned you're not sure how to do it. Well, let's bring the experts in and put them side by side with you so we can talk about how to move that forward. Girls programs. Some of these stats are just startling. C-level, CEO women. 94% of female CEOs participated in youth sport. If we know that, why aren't we making that more of an emphasis in this country? All of that data in terms of the impact of what it does to a young girl's life is something that is too important for us to ignore. So that's the second area of focus. Facility program, I mentioned, no fields, no gyms, no fitness centers, no youth sport fitness activities. This is going to impact communities positively. We have experts in the room. Jim mentioned URSA. We had a conversation with URSA about how to do it with their facilities. But URSA is such a benevolent organization. They're not just looking to do it for their members. They're looking to impact the community. So that's the type of organization that we want to partner with. Equipment. Johnny, you mentioned used equipment. Next week, I don't know if the Sports Fitness Industry Association is in here, but we are presenting to their board of directors next week. We want to get their used equipment, things that would end up in the discount bin, that would end up in the outlets. So it may not be used, but let's make sure that those organizations have a chance to participate. And the last slide here is the Presidential Youth Fitness Program. You've mentioned how we're not just solely focused on youth sport in America. It's the main focus, but we want to make sure that these kids have in-school physical education, and that's the best way for us to do it. So that program emphasizes student health, goal setting. It's important. We have a great partner in AAU. We need more. We need more support for that. So as I close, I would say to this group, this is a big invitation. If you look back at that slide with all the partners on it, we're inviting everyone that is a stakeholder, everyone that wants to contribute, that wants to be part of this initiative. This is a big, bold, sweeping public policy change. We're asking and inviting corporations, institutions, nonprofits to stand up and to help us, to support us. And the last thing I would say is, let's not make villains of the fast food companies. Let's not make villains of the soft drink companies. Let's ask them to come to the table. And I ask this council to work with us, to work with your official charity to get out there. When we are making these presentations, we want to make sure that your voice is heard. So it's not just your charity, but it's your voices. So thank you this afternoon for having me participate. And I firmly, firmly believe in what we're doing. I keep saying I'm going to close. Those of you who know me, it's a good thing I didn't go first. I too, people ask me, how do I get so excited about it? And I think, again, Jerome mentioned one of his younger siblings had a disability. My youngest brother was born with cerebral palsy, couldn't play. And so you have this opportunity to play, and you see in the 80s, he couldn't because there weren't systems. Well, I'm determined to make sure that all kids have access regardless. And this is what the Admiral said, regardless of ethnicity, sex, zip code. Youth sports for all is what we're all about. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Clay. He is, those of you who know him, he is incredibly inspiring, passionate, never stops working, and always supporting the cause. So thank you so much for your time, Clay. So, folks, that brings us to the end of our meeting. I want to say a huge welcome to those of you who have taken the time to participate, our speakers, to our volunteers, the ODPHP team, OWH, OMH, the volunteers that have helped us make this whole thing happen. We also want to thank those of you watching online and those of you in the room. We know there are a lot of ways to spend your time, so we're very thankful that you decided to spend it with us. And finally, most importantly, thank you, council members, so much for being here. You guys have incredible insights. Your time is precious. The resources and the insight that you bring to the table is inspiring. Like I said, these are servants and are just willing to work so hard and want to bring to bear all that we've discussed today about the National Youth Sports Strategy and the mission of the council. So at this time, I'm going to pass it over to Ms. Jennifer Bishop, and she will officially adjourn our meeting.
Thank you very much. Again, thanking everyone for their time and their effort in being here. And I am now officially closing out this annual meeting of the President's Council for Sports, Fitness, and Nutrition. Thank you.
Produced by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services at taxpayer expense.